We welcome Yogi Roth of the Pac-12 Network. And Yogi, you got a bunch of really dramatic weeks coming up. I mean, they've been dramatic. Last weekend was dramatic, but this feels like it's just week after week after week. You got Oregon, Utah. It feels like every USC game is now must see. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's beautiful, to be honest with you. As long as you don't, take a take a look or a lens at what's coming after the
Right.
season, because you're like, if you can stay connected to the moment. I've been saying this to my colleagues or even my family and definitely myself of just compete to stay connected to the moment, because the season is going to be a beautiful one when you just look at the context of college football. And I think when you look at the last couple of years, what the league had tried to do is make sure scheduling wise, like there's a must see marquee top 25, 1, 2, 3 games a week when it matters. And here we are entering the CFP dialogue. Like I'm going to present to the CFP later this afternoon, along with George Kliavkoff and Merton Hanks and Jim Thornby and our team. And away we go. And I think when you're in the center of it, it obviously is beneficial. Who knows if everybody will kind of beat each other, but it is going to be fun. And what I love the most, Andy, is that, I've kind of had to been the stump speech guy for years. Well, this is the third time game day is coming out west this weekend.
Yeah.
And with all the games you alluded to, it might be a fourth and a fifth and a sixth time they may come out to this part of the country, which you just haven't seen ever. So it's exciting to at least to be recognized and try to stay connected to that this fall.
Well, somebody sent me a potential 5-way tie at the top, and it makes sense. It's possible. I have no idea how they break the ties. I was trying to figure it out, and my brain just broke. But I mean, the sheer drama at the top, and like Oregon, Utah this week. I gotta tell you, Yogi, when Utah went to Oregon State and lost, and when you looked at the idea, okay, Cam Rising's not going to be back. What does that mean? But it feels like they've found so many different ways to win now.
Yeah, it's really been remarkable. You start thinking about who would you vote for coach of the year, and there's like a lot of coaches out here that you can make a case for, and Kyle Whittingham would be, right at the top. I mean, you talk Jonathan Smith, you could talk Jed Fish. And there's a lot you could talk about. Kalen DeBoer, who knows what happens with Oregon here. But you got to talk about Kyle Whittingham. And he has this quote within the facility, which is, "You become us, we don't become you." And, you work at a place that is all over recruiting. We know what recruiting can be. And it's really true. Nate Johnson was the fourth string quarterback after spring ball. And in training camp, he won the Baylor game, and then played, pretty good for a couple of weeks. And then here comes Bryson Barnes, who threw a touchdown the first pass of the game against the team that as well as anybody in Florida, and then hadn't thrown a touchdown pass until he threw for 3 against the Trojans. And I, as a former walk-on turned scholarship player, like he's my favorite guy. But to watch these guys not only meet the moment, but know that Kyle Whittingham, Andy Ludwig, Morgan Scalley, they're breathing the confidence into them. And I think that's a huge role of a coach, is to see the potential someone has and get them to the place where they could actualize it. Utah has done that, whether that's Sione Vaki doing what he did in high school or Bryson Barnes doing what he did in high school, which is playing with confidence. And that's so much of the game. And that's what we've seen. And they got the best defense, I think, in this league. It might be the best in the country. They have premier NFL players at every layer of that defense. So they will make life challenging. If they can run the ball, milk the clock in a bunch of different ways, which we saw against USC, they will be in position to win every game. And I think we need to start talking about them as a CFP contender and not just, wow, they're doing it without Cam Rising and Brent Keithy. Those guys haven't been there since the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Since the Rose Bowl. They haven't been in offseason workouts. Like it's not their team. They're still leaders on that team. But I think we need to start talking about Utah as a contender and not just a great story.
Well, this week is basically an elimination game for the CFP between Oregon and Utah. One of these teams is probably not going to be in contention come the end of Saturday. So, if you're Oregon, how tight are you coming into Rice-Eccles Stadium, which is a very tough place to play?
Yeah, I don't think they'll be tight at all. You've been around Dan Lanning a bunch. He's allowed me tremendous access since he's gotten out to Oregon. And this is a team, and they've got these DNA traits that are all over the facility. And the number one is connection. And every coach says we need to be a connected team, but it's hard to do it with the roster turnover. Oregon had a lot of roster turnover that doesn't get a lot of dialogue. A lot of guys left, a bunch of new guys came in, and they have become a really connected group. And how is it showcasing itself on the field? Well, I go to the offensive line, and I've seen every meaningful snap of play in the Pac-12 this season and really the last 20. But Oregon's offensive front is the most improved group this season among any position group in the Pac-12 and on the West Coast. And you look at the Texas Tech game, they had 14 penalties, 4 false starts. On the road at UW, they had 5 penalties and 1 false start. Like, they have just grown as the season has progressed. This defensive front is full of vets, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th year player in Popo Amavai. Like, I just think that they've been in enough of these, whether it's this season, previous years. It won't be easy by any stretch in Salt Lake City. That place is incredible, 80-some straight sellouts, but I don't think they're going to be tight. I think he's got this team cutting it loose, playing confident, playing free. The challenge will be, execution, and that's what all the challenges are in these tight games.
Well, and back to Utah, at the beginning of the season, who'd have thought that maybe Travis Hunter is going to be one of the most impressive two-way players in the conference. Sione Vaki's been amazing, and Kyle Whittingham saying he sees probably him contributing even more on offense going forward.
Yeah, well, you look at Utah, and it's funny whenever a new coach comes into this league, you do an interview with them, I do an interview with them, and they've all said a version of the same thing, which is Utah's kind of the blueprint, especially in recruiting. And you could look at Chase Hansen, quarterback turned safety, turned NFL linebacker. You can look at Nate Orchard, formerly Nate Fakafahua, who's a wide receiver, turned safety, turned edge rusher, just retired earlier this week from the NFL. You could look at Mekhi Bernard, who started at corner in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State, was also like a slot tailback type of player. They recruit guys that are just really good at the sport. And it's overused and cliche, but it's the old football player line. And it's true. Guys that have a nose for the football, understand spacing and timing, understand the acumen necessary to take a couple plays and understand the conceptual side of it and also the executional element of it. And that's what he did. You look at his wheel routes, it might seem like it's an easy route to run, but watch how he's grown as a route runner over the course of his time playing offense with Sione Vaki. Like, the little things is what stand out. Catching the ball, getting north and south. If you look at that play against Taka Curtis, a critical play in that game where he runs that little angle route, catches it, puts his foot in the ground, doesn't try to dance like most high school players do when they get the ball. And I go back to coaching. Like, there's all these little things that are allowing these really dynamic football players to become exceptional at their craft, and uniquely in Sione Vaki on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it's so much fun to watch. And, you wondered, like, when you realize Keithy's not coming back, okay, who is going to be their primary weapon? And they figured out he was playing safety. Who knew? I mean, it is amazing to watch. But that matchup looks like so much fun. I want to talk to you a little about USC and Cal, because it's been a weird week at USC. Lincoln Riley misses, like, I don't think people understand how sick you have to be as a college football head coach to miss practice. It doesn't happen. And Lincoln had to miss a couple. Meanwhile, it feels like the walls are closing in. Everybody's criticizing. What does USC do to bounce back?
Yeah, well, I get to call this one on Saturday afternoon with my partner, Ted Robinson, on the Pac-12 Networks, and can't wait to get there for a bunch of reasons. One, it's the last time, and I think 110 times they've played together, which is just sad, but we're going to celebrate it. When you look at SC, and I was there earlier this week in advance of this game, while on the outside, and you know this well enough, this is LA, man. Everything is hyper dramatic. Everything is a lot of expectations, which SC has put on themselves, but every coach pretty much puts on themselves. Like, how are you supposed to generate excitement if you don't say our goal is to win and win big? But within the walls of that thing, the players, the units, the sides of the ball, the staff, like, it's dialed, man. Like, they are not fragmenting. It is not, I'm going to sit out the season. Like, some of those comments are lunacy to me when you're looking at where we sit. And I get why. Like, I can have the conversation rationally around the why behind it. But knowing Caleb Williams the way that I've gotten to know him since he was in high school, knowing this program and covering it every single year like we have, this team's going to be fine. It's also in a rebuild. And I say that because we talked about UW and Oregon, and this gets no play, but we'll talk about it Saturday, is their defensive fronts specifically. 90% of the impact players have been there. They were recruited out of high school. They've stayed and developed. Braylon Trice, Zion Tupaloa Fatui, Edefuan Ulafashio. That's at UW. Look at Mace Funa, Brandon Dorless. You look at Popo Amavai in his 7th year for the Ducks. Like, they have been there and developed. For SC, every player is in their first or second year in the program. And most of the people in the front seven are in their first year because of the transfer portal. And none of them are Cedric Ellis walking through the door or Leonard Williams walking through the door. Like, there is still a developmental thing in college football, especially on defensive fronts. So I know people want to tear apart the staff and Alex Grinch's defense, and I get all that. Like, it's what you kind of sign up for in this era with the amount of money the coaches are being paid and the expectations and the media. Oh, I get all that. But when you look at the football side of it, I do not see a program falling apart in shambles. I see a program who played poorly at Notre Dame, didn't play great against Utah, but played against a team that we just talked about as being a sleeper, or at least in the conversation for the CFP, and who's beat them the two previous times. Like, I just think that some of those unknowns, then you look at the offensive line, they haven't been able to play complementary football in the run game to set up some of the RPO stuff that they have a lot of success doing in Lincoln Riley's past. And that's where we sit. And that's why coming into the season, I didn't pick them to go to the title game, because I just felt like those other teams had more veteran elements to them that you knew you could count on. Right now for SC, they got to come together in the last 4 weeks, not as a team, but just as a executioner in terms of 11 guys. It's cliche, but being in their proper gap. It's a one gap defense. Offensively, can you protect? They've struggled in those areas too consistently to put themselves in a position to be a top 4 team in the country.
And the thing is, the expectations are what they are, and they are to at least make the Pac-12 championship game. But to do that, you probably have to beat Oregon and Washington. Does this feel like a team that's capable of doing that?
Oh, yeah, they're capable. I mean, they got the best player in America. Do I think they will today? No, I wouldn't feel confident saying that. And I know UW's coming off a performance where they struggled. But I think creatively, Washington is one of the most creative offenses I've seen in my life in terms of how they stretch you. They're motioning the 6th most in the country, the way they shift and move guys. Oregon, the way they just stress you with Bo Nix's legs. Like, he still hasn't carried the ball a ton in a game, but it'll happen when they need it to happen. So no, man, I don't think so. I think tier 1 in this league right now is the 2 teams we just talked about. Tier 2 is really fun though, because there's a bunch of teams sitting right there in SC, Utah probably at the top, Oregon State at the top. Like, it's really fun to talk about those 2. And then SC, Arizona, UCLA, Washington State has shown they can compete in some of those games. They played great last week against Oregon, just gave them everything they could handle. But that's kind of how I see this thing right now. But they could beat them for sure. They got the best player in the country. They got skilled players that have not been what we thought they would be this year, but they have all the potential. They flashed, but they haven't put it together, and they will. They'll get one of them, I think, over the course of the last month.
Another team still in the mix that has to play a lot of these teams that we're talking about, the Beavers. They got to go to Arizona this weekend. Arizona finally broke through. It felt like Jed Fish's team was playing really well, but just couldn't get over that hump, and they finally do against Washington State, and then they have a bye week to get ready for Oregon State, and they get Oregon State at home. It feels like the Wildcats are kind of in a good spot right now too.
Yeah, well, it's been a beautiful rebuild. You look at year 1, they played 5 quarterbacks. They were in 8 games. They were within a score entering the 4th quarter. Think about that in year 1. Here we are in year 3, and it's a totally different deal, right? They just beat a top 20 team in Washington State, 1-score game against UW at home, every opportunity to beat SC in triple overtime, didn't get it done. And you're right, it's a turning the corner opportunity for them. And they haven't done it at home. I've called all the big games they've had at home. Oregon, UW, SC over the last 2 years, not able to get over the hump. This is a huge opportunity. It's going to be raucous. I mean, Jed Fish has created meaningful buzz in Tucson since he got there, and definitely around big home games. This is as big as it gets. The challenge is they're playing a team that is really an anomaly when you look at college football and how they play, what they do, and even how they're peaking with DJ Uiagalelei and Aiden Childs, giving you a little 1-2 punch at quarterback. I think Damian Martinez is the best back on the West Coast. His offensive line, they might have, Jordan Morgan and Talisi Fuanga might be the 2 best tackles on the West Coast, if not in the conversation among the country. When you look at the NFL draft next year, let alone Jonah Savanai, like, this game has all the things to it. I think I give Oregon State the edge. They've been in some of these environments before. I think their style of play lends to themselves, and we don't know who's going to play quarterback for Arizona. And I wonder what that is going to do. But make no mistake, Arizona is coming. I messaged one of their guys on their staff after they beat Washington State, because we had that game, and I said, man, you got a chance to go win the Big 12 next year. You guys got so much coming back. And immediately it was, we're trying to win the Pac-12 right now. So you're right. They're in the conversation. They could be in that 5-team tie. I wouldn't be
Yes, they're
shocked
very
if they
much
got a win.
involved. Yeah.
And they're real. And I think that's the other thing. Like, I think in college football, we get lazy. Arizona, SC didn't play well, or Wazoo didn't play well, or UW didn't play well. Well, how about Arizona's good? That's
I
where I
think
said,
that's when you saw the way they beat Washington State, that's the only conclusion I could draw, because it wasn't like they snuck by them.
right.
Like, they beat the heck out of them, and Washington State has been good.
Amen, man. It was 6-0 Washington State. First drive of the game, they go down and score. They go for 2, don't get it, and then 40-some unanswered points. And Jonah Coleman, right? He was a backup to Michael Wiley. Noah Fafita. You take away the first quarter against UW, and he's playing at a ridiculously high level.
Yeah.
Tetral McMillan, Jacob Cowing, Tanner McLaughlin, like they're going to move the ball. That's why this game is going to be so fun, because the Beavs have been a little banged up. I'd imagine they got right in the bye week. We'll see come Saturday night who's playing at corner, and in the secondary they had some injuries there, because they need to be at full strength, because this offense can jump on you. And I don't know if Oregon State, like Utah, is built to come from behind and throw it all over the yard. They can do it, but they want to run the football, play action pass. They want to control the game. And we'll see. I would imagine Arizona wants to get off to a pretty quick start and see if they could put a little pressure on the Beavs passing game.
I cannot let you go. I'm contractually obligated to ask about Coach Prime, because I do feel like the wider world may have said, okay, we've seen the Colorado stuff this year. Now let's wait till next year and see who they get. But I am fascinated to see if these guys can get bowl eligible, because I've said all along, if with this schedule they can get bowl eligible, it is one of the better coaching jobs you'll ever see. They've got a pretty rough stretch, starting with a game in the Rose Bowl against UCLA, another team that is not out of anything by any stretch. I mean, how do you think this one goes?
I think this is going to be another fascinating one, right? We talked about Arizona's quarterback situation, UCLA's quarterback situation. My gut says they go Ethan Garbers, but I don't know. Like him, Dante Moore, a little bit of Colin Schlee, who knows? But they're going to run the football. And Carson Steele is a proven, legitimate Power 5 back. And it's the best receiving
Garbers
core.
ran it well
last
week.
Zone read game. It's a part of what Chip Kelly wants to do. He loves repeating calls. If he can find a weakness, he'll exploit it. What did Stanford do? They ran the same play, it seemed like 7 times in the fourth quarter to beat Colorado in that comeback. They just kept running the same slant route. So I look at UCLA as the advantage here. The challenge, what I'll be wanting to watch in this game, is how does the offensive line of Colorado and Shedeur Sanders handle this defense of UCLA? Because it's statistically on pace to be the best for the Bruins since 1988. Danton Lynn is their new defensive coordinator, son of Anthony Lynn. And they are an NFL defense. And by that, I mean, they're not just going to go play what they've played every game. They are going to give the opponent something new to deal with. So, an example, for the first 4 or 5 games of the season, they were playing 5 down front. That's what they were doing. They were covering everybody up on the offensive line and making it one-on-one. Then they played Cameron Ward, called that game. Best passing offense, number 2 offense in the country at the time. And they went with a 3-man front and let Liatu Latu roam all over that defensive front, and he was a game wrecker the whole game. So I want to see, how does this offensive front of Colorado, which has struggled, especially when they don't get that first down and get into tempo mode, if they have to just execute, how do they do it against one of the better defenses in the country, not just out west? I go with UCLA in this game, but I'm with you. I mean, you have to give Coach Prime and Deion Sanders, his program, a ton of credit. You got this team to believe. What did he do in the bye week? He made him practice. I know that. So I'm excited to see how they come out. It's going to be crazy, though, because here in LA, you got these 2 teams. Colorado not playing, like they did in the first couple weeks of the season. It's sold out. The tarps are off at the Rose Bowl.
Tarps off.
Tarps are off. Tarps weren't off for SC last year. So, like, the buzz from Deion and in recruiting, you better believe this is a huge opportunity for both teams in this ball game and at the Rose Bowl.
Little game within a game, too. What can Colin Schlee tell UCLA's defensive staff about Sean Lewis, the Colorado offensive coordinator? Because Sean Lewis was Colin Schlee's head coach at Kent State.
I love it. Yeah, Sean's great, too. I'm happy for him and this offense and what he can do. He's a hell of a coach. So, yeah, it's still year 1 for them, and I think that's the biggest challenge for them is the league's so good, and then they went and lost to Stanford, and, seemingly like the bandwagon, you thought it kind of, people got off it. But, again, here comes Herbie and Fowler to the Rose Bowl to call this game. And
If the
then you've
tarps are
got
off at the Rose Bowl, that means it's a big deal.
it's a big deal, man. So I just love that. It's great for the West Coast. It's great for LA. I can't wait. It's going to be a really fun last month and a half of the season.
Well, Yogi, I can't wait to watch, and we will be watching along and enjoy USC Cal for the last time, except for bowl games.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but we're going to lean into it. We got all off season to be sad about it.
Thank you, Yogi. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.